Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video, and after the latest from the live radar, run through the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as we are looking at fairly mundane conditions throughout the next 5 days, looking pretty dry, but with a lot of cloud around, with bits and bobs of drizzle and maybe some lighter rain in the north. So fairly quiet and fairly non-eventful during the Christmas period, which a lot of people probably would prefer. If you're travelling, the last thing you want is heavy rain or even some snow, wind, things like that. So being fairly dry, high pressure dominated isn't really too bad at all. However, as we head towards the weekend start of next week, into the final couple of days of December, into the new year, we are going to see things completely changing. It is looking very likely now that we go much colder as we do head into early 2025. Exactly how cold it will be and whether we see any wintriness, we're still seeing quite a few conflicting signals from the runs, but today both the GFS and the GM do go cold to start 2025. Maybe not necessarily wintry, maybe not necessarily very cold, but definitely below average, kind of upper air temperatures getting down to the -5 area, which would give surface conditions mid to low single digits. Now the ECMWF has got a real Christmas cracker today, and it is exceptionally cold and blocked into early January, producing potentially heavy snow and just generally very cold conditions for not only a few days, not just a cold snap, but perhaps for more of a prolonged period of time, 5, maybe up to 7 days or even 10 days if we do see the blocking maintaining itself. And of course the ensembles are continuing to slowly creep down in their average as they do get closer and closer to being towards wintry snow potential kind of areas, getting down to that -5 at 850 HPA. But of course we'll check that out in the second half of the video. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, do like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. And if you start on the live radar, you can see exemplary conditions at the moment for fairly uneventful and mundane conditions. Fairly dry, bits and bobs of drizzle around, especially for parts of Scotland, maybe northern England. And we're going to see a bit more of this across Scotland through tomorrow, Christmas Day, and the subsequent days. But elsewhere, it is going to be fairly dry. The only issue is there is quite a lot of cloud around, a lot of gloom, making it feel not particularly cheerful and seasonal. However, hopefully we do see a bit of breaks in the cloud tomorrow. We have got some indications from the UKV that there will be breaks in the cloud, a bit of sunshine breaking through. But again, no guarantees. Again, cloud amounts can be very, very regional and very difficult to forecast. Microclimate conditions, like your elevation, like sort of the slight alterations in the dew point, that can make all the difference to whether we see a thin layer of cloud or not. So yeah, it's going to be very much up in the air, but hopefully there's a bit of a signal that we could see some breaks in that cloud in the next couple of days. Now, to look at the temperatures, it's peak afternoon. You can see it's actually very mild out there today. You see across Europe it's much colder, and this is because under the centre of the high across Europe, we've got a proper inversion taking place as the wind is coming slightly more from an easterly direction, slightly drier and slightly colder, whereas our feed is coming more from a southwesterly direction. So we've got higher dew points, which is contributing to that cloud, but also bringing up very mild air, exceptionally mild air at the upper air level. But of course at the surface, slight inversion taking place because we are close to the centre of that high, very little mixing of air, which means that it is cooling down, but nowhere near as much as if we were across mainland Europe. So pretty mild for the time of year, good few degrees above average, and that will continue over the next couple of days before it starts to tumble towards the end of the month and the start of 2025. Now, if you look at the latest UKV, you can see not really too much going on over the next couple of days. You can see a bit of rain there through Christmas Day across the far north of Scotland. This light weather front, this weak weather front, just skimming the far north of Scotland. But for most, it is pretty dry. And you can see during the afternoon, slight breaks in the sunshine appearing up and down the country. Perhaps eastern Scotland, northeast England, maybe central England, favoured. But really anywhere could see these small breaks. But we're not expecting wall-to-wall sunshine at all. Just could be some breaks at times. So hopefully that coincides with any periods, anyone wants to go outside for a walk or something is going to be fairly mild. So it'll be fairly pleasant. As we progress into Boxing Day, that weather front slowly shifts southwards, but it loses intensity, still delivering thicker cloud and bits and bobs of drizzle to a more widespread area, but nothing too crazy. You can already see to our north, slightly drier air, but that is associated with a colder air mass, and that's the cold air that is starting to try and push in and actually successfully pushes in as we head towards the weekend and start of the following week. Now, as we clear into Thursday and Friday, still got that weather front in the north. It's kind of very wavy, not really moving all too much. And then into the weekend, start to see that colder air slowly shifting southwards. Still very cloudy in the south, unfortunately, but in the north, a lot more sunshine breaking through. And eventually, that colder air mass starts to push in. Now, it's not very cold air yet, but it's just signs that the wind is shifting to a more north and northwesterly direction, and potentially to start 2025, the first couple of days could be completely northerly wind dominated. Now, if you look at the max temperatures, you can see it's going to be very mild over the next few days. This afternoon temperatures 9 to 12 degrees, so a good 3, 4, 5 degrees above average for the time of year. As we progress into Christmas Day, no real chance of a white Christmas at all. Even the highest ground of Scotland is going to be very mild. I don't think there is at all a chance of a white Christmas. Not only are the surface temperatures well above freezing, but most importantly, the upper air temperatures above freezing. The dew points are well above freezing, so it's quite literally impossible to see snow, even over the highest ground of Scotland, because those upper air temperatures are so far above what we'd expect them to be this time of year. If they were around freezing or below freezing, there would be a risk of snow across the Cairngorms up towards Ben Nevis, for example. But because the upper air temperatures are so mild, wouldn't be surprised if Ben Nevis is 10 degrees on Christmas Day. But for elsewhere, 8 to 11 degrees. So again, fairly mild, a good few degrees above average. As we progress into Thursday, it's turning slightly chillier across Scotland, so Boxing Day there could be a bit of snow across Scotland, but elsewhere still 8 to perhaps 11 degrees. Into Friday, starting to turn a little bit more chillier, more towards kind of 6 to 9 degrees, and then into the weekend, slowly turning colder once again. Again, that kind of 5 to 10 degrees, and eventually into Sunday, temperatures start to tumble away quite quickly in the north towards freezing, and we're slowly seeing those temperatures tumble down towards the end of the month. It does look like it'll be a fairly slow progress during the end of the month, but really as we sort of step into 2025, that's when we could see something a little bit more substantial, like we'll see now on the longer range charts. Now, if we do go over to the GFS first, it has been one that's shown a lot of very cold conditions over the past few days, but the last sort of day or so, it's been a little bit more pessimistic, still showing a colder pattern, just not quite as blocked and cold as some other runs are showing, and that does continue today. We've got the high pressure in control at the moment. As we head towards the end of the month, you can slowly see those winds veering more northwesterly, that higher pressure up towards northeast Canada, allowing this northerly flow to develop, and we do see northerly winds. However, we do see these small low pressure systems developing within this little kink in the jet stream that's sitting out in the North Atlantic, and that allows these low pressure systems to develop. Now, this will push in milder air for the south. It picks up milder air, and it will be very mild in the south. But it's also got exceptionally cold air wrapped in to the northern edge. So that means there will be a real mix of rain, sleet and snow within this system. And as it pulls away, it pulls a really strong northerly wind on its back edge. We see exceptionally cold air moving in there on its back edge. So wouldn't be surprised to see some undercutting within that weather front and potentially seeing some snow elsewhere. You can see substantial snow for Scotland here because they remain in the cold air for the full period. You can see here the mild air doesn't push in for Scotland at all, which means it remains cold completely here. Now again, this system could push further southwards. It could be further northwards. We'll have to wait and see. But again, I don't want to concentrate on this because other runs not showing this low pressure system at all. So again, a lot of uncertainty, and this is only in a week's time. Regardless though, it still has these northerly flows, cold, but eventually dry conditions with higher pressure building in as we do head into the first few days of January. After that though, the GFS does start to show more of a westerly flow. So it goes milder once again, stratospheric pull force, it returns to Greenland and northern Canada, that high pressure disappears, and it's more of the traditional west to northwesterly wind, maybe southwesterly at times as well. So GFS does look cold, maybe 5-6 days, but nothing to stand out really in terms of the actual cold air. Maybe some heavy snow associated with that low pressure system, but nothing too exceptional, a kind of colder snap with the risk of some snowfalls within that. But nothing out of the ordinary sort of pattern we'd expect to see a few times, at least every winter. So yeah, interesting there, definitely cold, definitely potentially wintry, but nothing, that stands out, nothing that, we would say is kind of a very cold spell. Now if we compare to the GEM, it is broadly very similar over the next few days. Again, we eventually see that north to northwesterly flow starting to push in. Takes its time. We see that low pressure system a little bit more delayed here in around 8 or 9 days time, and it develops slightly further southwards. So more of the north would be in that colder air, and eventually we see more sustained colder conditions there as we do head towards the early part of January. Interestingly, still got a lot of the tropospheric polar vortex towards Scandinavia. It would encourage more of a northwesterly flow than a northerly flow because the high pressure has lost a bit of its strength towards Greenland and northeast Canada. But nonetheless, still chilly, still would be unsettled. Very similar to the GFS in terms of the outcomes. Slightly different in the way we go about it, but in terms of outcomes, it's very similar. Cold, unsettled, not, very cold, not up and down the country, and not everyone's seeing snow, but there definitely would be snow opportunities. So both the GFS and the GEM, chilly, cold, below average, risk of snow, but nothing substantial, or at least widely nothing substantial. Of course, you can see locally substantial amounts of snow and very cold conditions, perhaps for northern Scotland, eastern Scotland, but up and down the country, we're not looking at anything, record-breaking here. However, the ECMWF, I must say, is exceptionally cold today. Now, unfortunately, there's a bit of an issue with the end of this run on West Central, which means essentially at sort of day 11, it doesn't have any data for the subsequent days, which is where it kind of consolidates the colder spell. So we will go to WX charts and just show you the overall pattern over there, to kind of end the run, and look at the precipitation types as well, just to show what the pattern could develop into. Now you can see it's pretty much the same as the other runs, if being completely honest, over the next 5 or 6 days, as expected. We do see that low pressure system develop, but it's much minor area of low pressure, and it's further northwards. Actually, it'd be rain for all there for Monday, the 30th of December. But as it clears, we do see a big northerly wind. No more low pressure systems sat in the North Atlantic. Higher pressure, much more dominant towards northeast Canada and Greenland, and it encourages an exceptionally strong northerly flow. And look at that, for New Year's Day, a channel low with milder air to the south, colder air to the north, sweeping through, could give substantial snow across somewhere in England and Wales. Now you can see some of those yellows and oranges are across southern England, so that does mean that there will be rain, especially on the south coast, but slightly further northwards, there is the risk of an amazing amount of snow. These channel low systems, they can produce, across sort of a widespread area, they can be the biggest snow producer for the UK. Of course, there are other subtle things that can happen, especially in Scotland, but for a widespread, low-lying area of snow, it's a channel low. That is what you want to see, and that's exactly what the ECMWF is pushing here. And of course, it's not in the kind of optimal position to give everyone snow, but nonetheless, it's still tracking through southern England, and it would give some severe conditions. Now, along with that, look at the setup. It's a straight northerly flow, lots of cold air to our north, and it stays like this for the subsequent days. Yes, the flow gets slightly cut off. The high pressure starts to lose a bit of strength, but we stay exceptionally cold. High pressure building in. This would cause severely cold nights with very little mixing of air. Cold air consolidated. Look at those temperatures. Minus 15 degrees across the Midlands somewhere. And of course, I think that would most likely be contributed by seeing heavy snow in the subsequent days. Of course, with snow on the ground, it allows those temperatures to fall away even further with more radiation overnight. But exceptionally cold temperatures during the nights. And look at the daytime temperatures. That must be down to snow. Yeah, we're not seeing -8 during the middle of the day without substantial snow cover. So across the Midlands, northern England, highs of -8. Severe cold here from the ECMWF. Again, it is locally because of the snow cover, but we're producing a very cold northerly wind, snowfall falls, and then high pressure builds in, and we see very stagnant conditions. Now, of course, in this pattern, it would be exceptionally cold, but we wouldn't see probably further snow until we get to the end of the run, where we start to see low pressure heading up from the southwest, and that could be another big snowmaker, as we do have very cold air consolidated across the UK. 2 metre temperatures well below freezing. This is Saturday the 4th of January. Look at that. Pretty much everyone is seeing an ice day, and a substantial ice day, -5 to -10. That almost seems unreasonable, if I'm being completely honest. That would be ridiculous. That would break records in quite a few areas for daily highs. And of course, the dew points as well below freezing. So all indications, if that weather front from that low pressure system pushed in, then it would be widespread snow. So although this pattern is not the most photogenic pattern we've ever seen, it's not this massive northeasterly wind, it's not a beat from the east, but because we're seeing very cold air moving in initially, producing snow and then high pressure toppling in at the coldest time of the year, early January, then we can see potentially some very exceptional conditions. Now, if you head over to WX charts, I do just want to have a look at the precipitation associated with the system, as we do have substantial snow potentially, and then we have some longevity to the colder spell. Now, if you head into early or late into next week, you see that low pressure system that moves through. The other runs had a bit of snow associated with here. Not much really in the way of snow, maybe with the higher ground in northern Scotland. But as that clears into the final day of 2024, we start to see very strong northerly winds, and then when this low collides, this is that channel low, collides with that cold air, heavy snow across the Midlands and northern England for New Year's Day. A snow event there. As that clears, lots of snow showers packing in, but eventually turns much drier, and it would be exceptionally cold under all of that snow. And then we see that low pressure system pushing up from the south. It makes some advance and produces some snow across the far south and southwest, but coming up against that very cold block, it does lose some of its intensity. And then towards the end of the run, look at this. We produce another northerly flow. Now, if you zoom out and put on the pressure charts, we'll be able to see how that does evolve into those longer range. You can see initially that northerly wind coming in, then we see that little channel low move through, stays very cold and northerly, high pressure builds in, that lower approaches from the south, and then look at this high pressure retrogresses back northwards, and we see another potentially exceptionally cold northerly wind. And if we put on the upper air temperatures for this same chart, look at all of this cold air ready to flood back in. Remember, by this point, the ground is frozen solid, so we don't even need that much in terms of cold upper air temperatures to see cold conditions at the surface. So yeah, an exceptionally cold ECMWF, as I said, not massively photogenic, but very long-lasting, a proper longer cold spells. You can see by the end of the run, it starts to build in very cold conditions once again, and it produces substantial snow and exceptionally cold, both upper and surface temperatures there. I couldn't believe that the West Central charts. To be honest, I hadn't actually looked at that before the video. Normally I do check out the data that we're going to have a look at, so I can kind of look at what expectations we're going to have. But I didn't look at those 2 metre temperatures, and I thought, they'd be cold, probably below freezing, but I didn't expect daytime highs in the Midlands potentially to be -8 or -9. That is ridiculous, and that would be pretty historic. So ECMWF may be a little bit off the charts today, but nonetheless just shows you what could happen if that high pressure across northeast Canada and Greenland is in the right position. Of course, it is coinciding with early January. That's probably the main reason why it's so cold, because we are at the time of year where we've got exceptionally cold air to our north, plunging in from the Arctic, and we have very low levels of sun strength and very short days, all of that coinciding together to produce these very cold conditions. I've said this time and time before, early in the winter, we have the very cold, we have the very short days, we have the very low level of sun strength, but we don't have the very cold air to our north. Later in the winter, we've got the very cold air to our north and east, but we've got longer days, stronger sunshine. It makes it more and more difficult to see exceptionally cold conditions. And this is kind of the peak time, this is where all of those things are in the favour of something colder. Remember, we saw the beast from the east back in 2018, late February, early March. If that had occurred 6 to 8 weeks earlier, mid-January, early January, maybe wouldn't have been possible because the polar vortex would have been stronger. We might have not seen the sort of sudden stratospheric warming we saw. But if it had occurred, let's just say hypothetically, the temperatures would have been 5 to 10 degrees colder than what they actually were, and areas that only saw a bit of snow would have seen a lot more snow, and that would have because it would have all settled. We wouldn't have seen any melting during the day. So all of those things could mean that this spell that could arrive, if the ECMWF is correct, could be very cold and prehistoric, coinciding with the coldest time of the year. After you finish by looking at the ensembles, we'll be able to see that there is spread. Not guaranteed we're going to see what the ECMWF is showing at all. You can see though very mild, trending back towards average, and by the end of the year we're back around average or below average. And to start 2025, fairly strong signal here from the majority of ensemble members that we're going to be at least a couple of degrees below average. You can see that there is still scatter. There are still some that are mild. Operational one's pretty mild in the longer term, as we saw, goes westerly again. But there is a fairly strong cluster around that -5 to -10 slot. Not expecting -10 or below that. We're not seeing far-fetched north or easterly wind, which would be required to see those sort of -10 and below air masses. But as I said, because of the time of year, we don't actually need that much cold air. So definitely clustering appearing there, and you can see 2 meter temperatures are looking very cold. Lots of scatter there to start January, but lots down towards those low single digits. Dew points as well, fairly encouraging if you want some winteriness, lots around freezing or below freezing, and there are even some quite big snow depth spikes here, but again, don't take these too literally, they're just showing you what ensemble members are showing that snow is possible. And if we do finish, by just comparing to the ECMWF ensembles, unfortunately, again, I think this is due to the issue with the operational run not loading on Weather Central. For the ensembles here, we haven't got the operational charts, but the operational chart would be down towards the bottom here, would be on the low end of these ensemble members. Let's not be kidding ourselves there. It is one of the coldest runs. But nonetheless, you can see quite a big cluster that'll go well below average, down towards the -5 or lower, and that cluster has increased in the last day or so. Remember, yesterday I did say the ECMWF ensembles have been a bit more pessimistic, but it does look like they're slowly shifting to something a little bit colder. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see exactly how it does play out. But if we see anything like that ECMWF run, then we are in for a very frigid and potentially snowy start to 2025. So anyway, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.